Finding all these things in one location, just below the surface, just ready to be uncovered. It's almost a stuff of dreams. In 2018, a farmer's field in southeastern Norway turned into one of the most important archaeological sites in Viking history. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a massive ship buried just beneath the surface. An untouched time capsule from over 1,100 years ago. But as experts began digging, the real shock came not from what they found inside the ship, but what was beneath it. Before the first boat, the smaller one, was discovered, I think the largest number of bodies buried at the same time in a boat was 4. It was hiding a secret so shocking that it would rewrite what we know about Viking history. The buried ship. In late 2018, in a stretch of farmland in Østfold County, southeastern Norway, archaeologists scanning the ground near the ancient gel mound stumbled onto something remarkable. Using ground-penetrating radar GPR, a non-invasive tool that reveals what lies beneath the soil, they detected the unmistakable outline of a massive ship. While a startling discovery in Norway, a buried Viking longship, the nearly 66-feet-long ship buried less than 2 feet below the topsoil. It measured about 66 feet long, buried just below the surface. No excavation had taken place yet, but the image was clear. It was a Viking ship grave forgotten by time. But it's possible to have around 100 men on board a ship like that. So, it's quite big. This wasn't a shipwreck. This was a burial. And to understand why this mattered so much, it helps to step back and look at something older than even the Vikings. Our human obsession with death and the afterlife. Is death important for us human beings? For life, for us as a society? If you could live forever, would you live forever? Across the globe, cultures have developed unique, sometimes or inspiring ways of honoring their dead. In Egypt, pharaohs were buried in pyramids, surrounded by gold, and guarded by curses, so that the dead king could participate in mysterious rituals to become one with the sky goddess. In China, emperors rested beneath earth mounds with terracotta armies. In the British Isles, Neolithic people dug into hills to create passage tombs like Newgrange. And some even speculate that the spirits would have used the light to leave the burial chamber. And in the Arctic, even the Inuit built stone kinkars for their departed. Yet among these many burial traditions, the use of boats stood out as something deeply symbolic and strangely consistent across distant civilizations. I think the thing that caught everyone's attention, ship burials anyway. So, I was excited about that. In some cultures, boats weren't just transportation for the living, but vehicles to carry the soul across some great spiritual sea to the afterlife. To place a body in a boat was to prepare it for the ultimate journey, not across the ocean, but across realms. It's truly astonishing. The nature of that burial is like nothing we've ever seen. This idea shows up again and again in ancient Egyptian texts. The sun god Ra sailed across the sky by day and through the underworld by night in a solar bark. In Norse mythology, the dead rode to Valhalla aboard burning ships pushed out to sea. And in real-world burials, these stories were echoed in grand gestures like the one uncovered in Østfold. This Viking ship burial that was really something special. The ship discovered in Østfold wasn't the first of its kind. One of the most famous ship burials in history was found at Sutton Hoo in England in 1939. Inside a massive burial mound was a ship carefully laid out and packed with treasures. Items from as far away as Byzantium and the Mediterranean were recovered, such as swords, helmets, silverware, and gold coins. It was likely the final resting place of King Raedwald of East Anglia, a 7th-century ruler. The richness of the burial stunned historians, not just for its luxury, but for what it implied. The lavishness of the grave could suggest that it's him that dating is spot on. That early medieval Europe was more connected, wealthy, and spiritually complex than previously believed. That discovery raised a powerful question. Where did this practice of ship burial begin? Was it purely Norse? Did it come from older Indo-European traditions? Or was it an idea that passed between ancient peoples like a whispered story reshaped with each retelling? What we do know is that by the time of the Viking Age, ship burials were both rare and reserved for the elite. These burials weren't common. They were statements made by royalty, chieftains, and warriors of high honor. Only a few owned a ship to carry them beyond death. So, when the GPR scan revealed a 66-foot ship near the Gel Mound, a site already known for its Iron Age burial monuments, it wasn't just about finding wood in the dirt. It was about finding a missing piece of history, a symbol of status, power, and deep belief. What exactly lay inside that ship? That was a question on everyone's mind. But long before the first spade hit the soil, the discovery had already reignited a much older fascination. Where did this strange burial custom come from? The origins of the Viking ship burial tradition. Long before the Vikings set sail across Europe, the tradition of burying the dead in ships was already taking shape. The roots of this practice can be traced back to earlier Germanic tribes who saw death not as an end, but as a journey, and like any important journey, it required preparation tools and, above all, a vessel. One of the most striking examples comes from the Merovingian dynasty, which ruled parts of what is now France and Germany from the 6th to 8th century. These kings and nobles buried their dead in elaborate ways, often including wagons, chariots, weapons, and on rare but powerful occasions, boats. Horses were sometimes added, too, symbolizing the journey into the afterlife. These burials weren't quiet affairs, but public shows of power, legacy, and belief fit for elites who wanted to be remembered. But it was the Vikings who took this ritual and turned it into something legendary. By the time Viking culture began to rise in the late 700s, they had inherited and reimagined this burial style. For the Norse, ships were more than transport. They were sacred bridges between worlds. The boats the Franks had were left behind from Charlemagne's age. They were like hulks. They were unmaneuverable. A Viking's ship was part of their soul, and in death it became the bridge between worlds. They believed that the dead would sail to the afterlife, a place called Valhalla or Folkvanga where warriors would feast forever if they died with honor. In this way, the ship was a portal and a final ride across cosmic seas. But the Vikings added their own flavor to the tradition. Their burials were deeply tied to their mythology. Norse stories told of gods who traveled the skies and seas in ships. Even the sun and moon had boats pulled across the sky. So burying someone in a ship wasn't just about honoring them, but a way of placing them into the largest spiritual order of the universe. These funerals also followed strict social rules. Only the most respected chieftains, warriors, or high-status women received ship burials. Some were burned in fiery ceremonies. Others were buried whole with their ships placed inside burial mounds. It was used as a burial ship for 2 women. The ship burial itself was tremendous. These mounds acted like ancient tombstones, visible from afar. Over time, ship burial became a powerful symbol across Scandinavia. It showed who held power, who mattered in the eyes of the gods and the people. And these traditions didn't stay local. From Norway to Sweden to as far as the British Isles, Viking ship burials became markers of Norse presence, belief, and ambition. Each new burial that archaeologists uncovered added more detail to this evolving picture. But the discovery in Stfold County seemed different. This ship had been buried just below the topsoil, only a few feet from the surface, suggesting it had either been hurriedly or deliberately hidden. Why would such a significant ship be placed so shallowly, unlike the deep mounds seen elsewhere? That single fact raised many questions. Was this an emergency burial, a makeshift ritual, or perhaps something secret, hidden in plain sight? When archaeologists finally began digging, they realized this wasn't just a burial ship. It was a laid monument. Beneath the ship, they uncovered a strange arrangement of artifacts and burnt soil that pointed to a second burial chamber, a hidden, older layer possibly containing the remains or offerings of an earlier ceremony. The evidence suggested that someone or something had been buried there first, then later disturbed, and finally honored again with the ship burial on top. The most bizarre and thrilling find came from that hidden crypt, foreign coins dating to the 9th century, silver dirhams minted in what is now Baghdad. One of them had been pierced directly through its center, likely repurposed as an amulet or possibly even used as a symbolic object in a ritual. The presence of Islamic coinage in a Viking grave was startling but not entirely unheard of. Vikings had extensive trade networks stretching into the Islamic world, but its placement in a ritualized space below a ship burial added mystery. Was it a charm, a warning, or an offering? And if so, to whom or what? It also raised other troubling possibilities. Could this have been a double burial, a symbolic or spiritual fusion of two cultures? Or perhaps it was a grave desecrated and reclaimed. Or maybe it belonged to a person who carried power across borders, across beliefs. The dirt itself seemed to whisper that this wasn't a typical Viking burial. The soil was scorched and mixed with ash, evidence of fire rituals or perhaps even a cremation. But there were no bones, no human remains, only objects, circles of broken shields, and the unmistakable layout of two distinct burial events, one atop the other. The absence of a body was unnerving. Had it been removed, never buried, or had it turned to ash in some elaborate, half-forgotten ritual? Theories flourished. Some archaeologists speculated that the ship burial was meant for someone who had died far away, perhaps lost at sea, whose remains could never return home, and so the ship stood in their place, a symbolic monument. Others thought it may have been magical, a site meant to bind a curse or bless a community, or perhaps even an elite figure too dangerous, sacred, or politically sensitive to bury openly. The burial chamber beneath it, the lower crypt, became the most contested point. The foreign coins, the strange absence of a body, and the overall layout led some to suggest it was a laid myth, a legend in real dirt. But before these debates could be settled, something even more baffling happened. After excavation, the site was recovered, sealed, closed to the public. Officially, it was to protect it from the elements and await future excavation efforts with better technology. But the suddenness, the quiet closure of a site that had just promised so many answers, it felt like a door being shut on a mystery. This only fueled speculation. What had really been found in Stfold? What truth was too sensitive, or too explosive, to expose completely? And if this shallow grave had held this much layered meaning, what else lay beneath the many other burial mounds across Norway? The Galstad ship may be unique, but it's not alone. Dozens of similar mounds, some already mapped, others still unknown, dot the Norwegian countryside. Each one could contain a secret as vast as this one, waiting just inches beneath the grass. Some may carry ships, others chariots, and still others graves long forgotten, built by hands that believed every burial was not just an end, but a message. That message was often clear. Remember us, remember what we believed, remember who we were. And in the case of the Stfold ship burial, the message is hauntingly incomplete. It shows us a ritual that evolved over centuries, from carts and chariots to majestic sea vessels. It reflects a belief system shaped by stories of gods, heroes, sun voyages, and afterlife halls where fallen warriors feast. But it also reveals that even in the most public of rituals, secrets can be hidden, rituals layered one atop the other, histories rewritten, graves reused, reinterpreted, or even deliberately obscured. Perhaps that's the greatest lesson of the Stfold ship, that the past is not fixed. Even the Vikings, with all their fire, ships, and saga songs, understood that memory is fragile, that death is not just an ending but a question forever echoing beneath our feet. Today, as archaeologists continue scanning fields, forest floors, and fjords with ground-penetrating radar, they are finding more than just wood, coins, or artifacts. They are uncovering echoes of a civilization that spoke through silence, through the placement of a ship, the ring of a shield, the crackle of fire over earth. They are reading messages sent by people who believed death was a voyage and who prepared their dead not just for burial, but for crossing into myth. In that sense, each new discovery is not just a scientific achievement, but a reconnect with the dead, with ourselves, and with a timeless yearning to be remembered. The ship in Stfold rests now beneath protective layers of earth, but its story sails forward, across documentaries, research papers, museum halls, and now into our own imaginations. For what lies just beneath the surface, barely 2 feet down, can still rewrite everything we thought we knew about the past.